Welcome. In this video, we're going to talk about leg lifts in Haidong Gumdo forms, part 2. Obviously, watch part 1 first. If you watch part 1, you also know to watch the original video of Just a Bug's interpretation of lifting a leg in Korean martial arts. Highly recommend watch that one first. Also watch part 1 first because it kind of builds up to it anyway, and then come back here. So to recap a little bit, so there's an idea of miscommunication. Again, not quite something we're going to do in terms of knowing the original intent from Gumdo, because Gumdo is a living martial art, like the person who made it up is still alive. We can still ask him, all that fun stuff. However, there's many types of misunderstanding or miscommunications or deliberate reinterpretations of techniques in order to make them more work, but also more effective in terms of fighting or just understanding the general geometries of the form. We also talked about voiding the target space. I want to re-emphasize that it can be voiding the knee or voiding the leg that's being dropped. It can also be voiding, like especially if you're leaning forward, voiding the whole body in order to counter with something else. The third part we talked about was adding more power with mixed results, specifically in Gumdo, or at least in the ones I showed. And then the last one, and then we're going to talk about that today, is going to be stopping a spin. Considering that you watched part 1, you already know that Gumdo does this, so we're going to kind of highlight that soon. I'm going to take that idea, splice it a little bit, and then make that concept work for more ideas. I'm also going to add 2 new categories, which I can just say now, right? So one of them is absolutely useless, and that's sort of the title, is it's aesthetic. So it's doing something that looks good, maybe it's acrobatic, maybe it's showing off prowess, but ultimately it has no function aside, or no like martial function aside from looking pretty. And the last point is going to be about gaining a little bit more distance. This is in fact something that is more canonical within the Federation as far as I know, right? I believe I learned this from someone like within like the direct line of information. So we're going to talk about that. So first, let's talk about that stopping a spin. Of the combinations that showed so far, only one of them has been a spin like that. So if we're here, just taking it straight from the form, because why not? If we take it from our Gung Gai Dong Yip Pao Sensei, we're going to land as we do a diagonal cut. We're going to spin through diagonal, and then leg lift as I do this next diagonal here. Okay, so in terms of do we do it to stop a spin? Yes, this does happen in Gumdo several times. It's usually the same combination actually. It's usually what I believe Chief Master Jenko called Around the World, is the whole diagonal and then leg lift up and maybe doing something either from here or maybe turning the other direction. But we do in fact use this. Let's try it, right? So let's try doing that spin with the leg lift and without the leg lift. I don't know if this is picking up, but this is the third time that the microphone came flying off, so hopefully it's not damaged and you still hear my voice fine. But taking that spin, so hopefully it won't fly off this time. But from here, we're going to land, diagonal, spin, diagonal, leg up, diagonal. But let's try that without the leg lift, right? So if we're here, bang, 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 I'm kind of off balance, and it's a little bit hard for me to get back into, you know, fighting fit. Fun fact, this is actually counterbalanced in Bangkok 4, where we do a down upcut immediately after, right? So if we're here, I'm gonna land, spin. Normally I would be off balance here, but then I come around again for a 1-2, 1-2, kind of come up that way. So that's actually a way for them to absorb that extra angular momentum. What I want to do is take that idea and expand it, right? So why does a leg lift stop a spin? There's going to be an opposite vector that we're moving from, right? So the main thing that we're doing with our spin is to have that angular momentum coming around this way. By bringing that knee up in the equal and opposite direction, it can kind of dissipate at least some of that force. So especially if the knee is coming up equal and opposite to the sword itself, that's going to give you a lot more stability than you might think. But let's actually take a look at a few examples that we've already sort of done, right? So, not sort of done, we have done, right? So from here, from our Sangsu 9, so we talked about that strike to the knee, or to the neck, sorry. If I lift my leg just back, not great. So it is a leg lift, but it's not a knee up. However, in the form we bring the knee up. Now, I've been told that this is not canonical, so keep that in mind. However, if I think about almost like crunching in, my diagonal cut is coming this way. My knee is coming this way. So by having those equal and opposites, so although there's a lot of power moving each direction, the whole system, my body being the system, is still neutral, right? So if I'm here, and I really throw my knee up as I threw my sword down, pretty stable, all things considered, right? So it adds a level of stability. Another example of this is in Jembek, but I'm going to shortcut it because, first of all, I can't show Jembek, but also it's in the basics. So if we take Palsungse, so we're here, we land as we do our center cut. Normally how it's taught is cross cut and then raise that foot up into Gongyip Dongyse, or Dongyip Palsung, Gongai Dongyip Palsungse, right? However, the old way and the way that I learned it is from here, going to lift the knee up as a counterbalance for that crosscut. Crosscut has a horizontal vector, meaning if I bring the knee straight up, it's not going to counterbalance it. We're here, right? All bad. However, if we bring that knee up on an angle, the more horizontal the better, the more it's going to counteract, right? So if we're here, pretty stable, right? It may not have added a lot of power if it added any power at all, but did not dissipate a lot of it. So it wasn't like hemorrhaging power. So the idea, like the rationale behind that spin, with a knee up stopping the spin, is that counterbalance at work. But let's take a look at that combination one more time, right? So from here, this is a good example. This, no, right? There is no counterbalance acting as the opposite of my forward cut here. So there's nothing really counterbalancing here. I can cover. This next one is a good example. As my knee comes up, my sword comes down, I come back up for that block. But let's talk about that dirty fifth one that I'm adding, and then we can get back to something interesting with the sixth one. So with the fifth one, aesthetics. Things that, when done well by a good practitioner, they're impressive, right? So think about Bokose, right? So our very, very deep stance, which I'm not going to try to do because I'm going to look really silly doing it, although I should be able to do it, is not functional. However, it is very athletic. It looks good when done well. However, let's take that combination that we did earlier and actually expand it a little bit. So if you remember our around the world technique here, we're landing, cutting, and doing one more. Secretly, the next move is I'm going to look that way into a Gongai Dongyip Palsungse, hold this, and take 3 seconds to land as I get into a deeper stance, and then defense. So, what was the purpose of that, right? So, if we're here, and I just did my cut here as my equal and opposite, sure, I can maybe use the leg up to make it not harder, not easier, but not harder, to just turn and then hold this position because I can. In theory, I can, right? And then show off that athleticism by getting into a guard and then into another guard. So, yeah. So this will happen. Whenever you have something that is at least partially spectacle, whether that's a sword dance, whether that's a form that's based on the sword dance, whether that is a generally good form, but they add flavor and flair because they won the cartwheel in a form. I'm looking at you, 9. Sure, just be aware that it happens sometimes is for the reason that it just looks nice. I'm going to briefly modify that in the sense that it can be used as a prototype to practice balance, but functionally from a martial perspective, ultimately it's not going to be as useful as just drilling a few more times on your balance in an actual fighting or sparring situation. And the last one, and the one I'm going to leave you with, is slightly more canonical, which is always good, right? I'd like to actually have things I can say like, oh, you can actually do this and mention this to your sabanim and they won't murder you, right? Is the idea that can add a little bit more reach. So let's take a look at a few combinations that we've, again, at this point, seen so many times. So from here, I can just strike. Okay, it's whatever, right? However, with the knee up, I can get further and further and further and further the more I reach. So that can add a level of distance in terms of our cut. Our next move, over the shoulder, aiming for the ankle. I can aim here right now, but if I bring that knee out, I can get a little bit more further, and further. That can ideally do a little more damage, or at least damage them without me being as exposed, which, full disclosure, if you're doing something really ridiculous like that, to get an extra like foot or so of distance, but compromising your integrity, compromising your head, just do something else. Like there are better ways to get someone's ankle or take someone down than exposing your head and lowering yourself. So it's very easy for them just to swipe away at you, avoiding their target maybe as they strike you down. And the last one with our around the world combination. So if we're here and we do our cut, and then from here, if I really want to get more distance, so this is no distance, or standard distance, not no distance, standard distance. But if I really want to, and bring my knee up, I can get a little bit more reach if I want to follow through, and hoping that the counterbalance will stop me from like opening my own leg from, you know, the full power of a cut. But in closing, I would recommend take a look at Just the Bug's channel. Again, this was just one video that kind of caught my eye because there's a lot of leg lifts in Gumdo. But he has a Jedok series that is also really interesting, trying to take something from the Muye Double Donji, the Jedok Admiral sword specifically, and his scholarship is really good, so I highly recommend that. But hopefully you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you like the idea of actually incorporating all these ideas into your form. Both that, make sure you stay safe, stay humble, and keep training.